Everywhere you look around, there's a company connected to a logo, whether big or small. And today, we're going to get into the origins of Easter.
The resurrection day of Tammuz. So, Semiramis became known as the fertility goddess Ishtar, and Semiramis was the mother and wife of Tammuz, and also her son slash husband Nimrod, who had passed on. So Semiramis became known as the fertility goddess Ishtar. She took on many names in different cultures, including Isis, Diana, Astarte, Ishtar, Aphrodite, Venus, and Easter. She was even identified with Mary, as Mary was falsely deified and took on the titles of Mother of God and Queen of Heaven. Her son Tammuz took on many names as well, like Horus, Apollo, Sol, Krishna, Hercules, Mithra, and finally Jesus. The name Jesus H. Christ, in fact, originated by Constantine as Jesus Horus Krishna. Jesus Horus Krishna then evolved into Jesus H. Christ over the years, and then of course we know the H kind of has been dropped over the years, and he's just referred to as Jesus Christ. All the names of Tammuz put together for the son of the sun god, which was Nimrod, and member of the Trinity, worshipped on Sunday, the day of his sun god. So Semiramis instituted a holy day in her Babylonian religion in honor of the supposed death and resurrection of her son Tammuz. So to the right, you actually see a picture of Semiramis and Tammuz, the Madonna and child, and then Mary and Jesus. You have to notice that the actual child in these images is not really a baby, but a actually pretty fully developed man. So while protesting Catholics, also called Protestants, deny worship of this pagan deity, they indeed contradict that denial in action, as they openly do just that on Sunday, Christmas, and Easter. So continuing with these images, to the right, you see that to the left, the image to the left of these images, you see the progression of it being going through Madonna and child. You see it with Isis and I believe it's Isis and Horus. Don't quote me on that, because I get the names confused when it comes to the Egyptian gods and goddesses and things like that. And then you finally have it evolving into Jesus and Mary. So we see a painting of Jesus and Mary, which is the far right image, which is all the same exact Babylonian deities, just with different names. So we have to begin to admit that this is a very obvious truth, that these idols were not renamed because the pagans now all of a sudden believed in Yahusha the Messiah. No, that's not what happened. Tammuz and Ishtar, or Semiramis, simply had their names changed in the false religion of Catholicism or Christianity, because they're simply the same religion, and many people don't want to accept or realize that, which is a carbon copy of the mystery religion of Babylon. What we now call halos were nothing more than images of the sun, which were clearly demonstrating who these paintings were truly representing. So they weren't representing Yahusha, our Messiah, but Tammuz, and not Miriam, which was Mary's Hebrew name, but Ishtar or Semiramis. The real truth behind the cross of Jesus and the halos around Jesus and Mary is simple. Jesus is Tammuz and Mary is Ishtar. They were renamed and became the latest versions of the Babylonian Madonna and child. This is clearly depicted in the image to the right, as we see images of the sun god behind them, with the X of Tammuz, or the cross of the equinox from the zodiac, over the sun behind Jesus' head. And you see that in the picture in the bottom right corner. We see the crown on the Queen of Heaven and Tammuz in the upper right image of Jesus and Mary. So there still remains idols in the Vatican of Tammuz the Great Hunter, which is the image you see to the right to this day. They're referring to Christianity and Catholicism's real Messiah, who they renamed Jesus, or Jesus, or Iesus, or IHS, which means Hail Zeus, or Son of Zeus. And don't worry, this is something we're definitely going to go into deeper when we talk about the Great Deception, and we're going to really kind of begin to dissect the meaning of this name and everything. So again, in the image to the right, you see an idol of Tammuz the Great Hunter directly in the Vatican. We pass on images of Tammuz, the son of Semiramis, today as Cupid, the son of Venus, as he's still depicted as a mighty hunter, complete with the bow and arrow. So you see an image to the right, you have Cupid, where he's depicted with the bow and arrow, and then you also have an image of Tammuz, or Nimrod, because Tammuz was really just Nimrod reincarnated, who were both mighty hunters and hunted with bows and arrows. So Satan has very craftily hidden this Babylonian worship to target the minds of our children. We as adults have these traditions ingrained in us, and then we pass these traditions or these abominations down to these abominations that are abominations to Yah, we pass those down to our children. And the process continues generation after generation, which really explains why we become very, very, very deeply ingrained, and we don't even have a complete understanding as to why we celebrate and follow these certain rituals and believe these doctrines. We just believe them because our family did, and that's what we were taught. But we never really started to question anything until really now, when you're seeing a whole generation of people begin to wake up. So we were warned of this, and it was prophesied to be true, that at this time in history, as Yah moves on his chosen in every nation, according to Jeremiah 16, verse 19, says, Yahuwah, my strength and my fortress, my refuge in time of distress, to you the Gentiles will come out of the nations and will come back to you from the ends of the earth and say, our ancestors possessed nothing but false gods, worthless idols that did them no good. We need to wake up and realize that every established religion, especially Christianity and Catholicism, has been polluted with the mystery religion of Babylonian gods, rituals, and worship. We still hunt Ishtar or Easter eggs in honor of Tammuz the great hunter on Ishtar's day or Easter, and eat ham in his honor because he was killed on a hunting expedition by a wild boar, which is a wild pig. We just call it by its English name Easter, but every ritual remains exactly the same as it was in ancient Babylon. We no longer keep the Passover and eat the lamb as commanded by the Messiah, which he was actually strengthening the law of Yahuwah, not creating his own commands, just so you know, as he kept Passover on the 14th of Aviv, or the eve of Passover, just before he gave his body as the Passover lamb. The last thing Yahushua said to his disciples, but before dying on Passover, was to keep this in remembrance of me. And we see this in Luke 22, verse 19, where it says, and when he had taken some bread and given thanks, again, this occurred on the eve of Passover. He died on Passover. He did not have a Passover dinner. That's another false doctrine that we've been taught growing up, that he died. He had Passover meal and then he died. He didn't have Passover meal. He had a meal that came before the Passover, what people call the Last Supper, but it was really called like the Shagiga. It was that meal before Passover. So anyway, and given thanks on the eve of Passover, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, this, referring to this Passover dinner, this pre-Passover dinner they're having, is my body, or the Passover lamb, which is given or sacrificed for you. Do this, or keep the Passover, or keep this ritual in remembrance of me. So do we actually obey our King, who is our Messiah, Yahushua? No, we don't, because we actually now keep Easter or Ishtar and eat ham because this is what was passed down to us from our ancestors. We literally eat the most abominable beast as defined in the Torah. We do this in honor of Tammuz, who was killed by a pig. The fact that Jesus is in reality the Babylonian Tammuz, reincarnated Nimrod, son of Baal or Baal, is denied by Christianity as they have been given over by Yahuwah to believe a lie. They've literally fallen from Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz under another name as they became Isis, Horus, and Seb, or IHS, which is the monogram for Jesus, Horus, Krishna, all names for Tammuz. Jesus, Horus Krishna, or Jesus, Horus Krishna, evolved into Jesus H. Christ in English, but in the Latin it still remains IHS. And you'll actually notice that, especially in the Vatican, they have IHS on everything, on their robes, on their podiums, and things like that. But there's a lot of Christian churches, especially here in America as well, that have IHS on different banners and things like that. And, you don't even realize it until you really start to learn the truth of these things. But in Latin, it remains IHS in the middle of Sol Invictus, the same invincible sun that was worshipped from Nimrod all the way to Constantine. This same false Messiah is worshipped worldwide today in Christianity and Catholicism. IHS is the very monogram of Jesus H. Christ and is carried around by the high priests of Baal or Baal to this day, with the cross of Tammuz blazoned on top and the center of a sun. And you see this in the image to the right. So this may begin to look very familiar to you. Now you're kind of like probably thinking, yeah, I've definitely seen IHS around a lot. At least I know that that's what I was seeing. Proudly displaying to the world the truth on the back of his robe that he serves Ishtar, Horus, Seb, as he places the symbol of the sun worship on the heart of his goddess Ishtar, which they simply changed her name to Mary. And this is an image you see to the right as well. This is, a high priest or a pope. I don't know who it was exactly in the image, but you see they have the IHS on the back of their robe, and it has the cross section of the zodiac with the sun, obviously, and you see the rays of the sun, and then you see that he is placing something on Mary, which we know was really just renamed Mary from Ishtar. And so, it really just makes you start to question a lot of things. This is pagan Babylonian sun worship, which again, we're going to talk more about in the next mini-series, but we're going to be proving that the religion of Babylon was formally transferred to Rome and became what we know today as the Catholic priesthood. So let's talk about the 40 days of weeping for Tammuz. So when Tammuz was 40 years old, hunting in the woods, he was killed by a wild boar or a pig. This is why we eat ham on Easter or Ishtar Day, even though it is against Yah's commandments to eat pork. Tammuz took after his father Nimrod in that he was a mighty hunter. After Tammuz died, his mother Semiramis began the custom in Babylon called 40 days of weeping for Tammuz. People were commanded to fast and pray for Tammuz while he was in the underworld. They exchanged one day of pleasure in this life for each year of Tammuz's life. So 40 years, 40 days. So today in the Roman Catholic Church, this has been renamed Lent. These 40 days of fasting from something begins on what is called Ash Wednesday, which is something we talked about in the last video, in the Catholic Church and many Protestant churches. The cross of Tammuz is written in ash on the forehead of the faithful. The priest takes ash as they draw a mark on the foreheads of a cross. The priest then recites a declaration, created from ashes into ashes we shall return. We were told that when we celebrate Lent that we're commemorating the time when our Messiah fasted and prayed in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. But this is a straight pagan lie. The truth of the matter is that our Messiah actually fasted and prayed during the 40 days of repentance, which was leading up to Yom Kippur, which is nowhere near Easter. This is like in the fall, just so you know. It had nothing to do with Lent or Easter. We see actually that Yahuwah condemns this practice of weeping for Tammuz or Lent in Ezekiel 8, chapter 8, verse 13 through 14. And so it says, "Turn you yet again, and you shall see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of Yahuwah's house, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Then he said to me, Have you seen this, O son of man?" Today in many cultures, people make Easter bread or hot cross buns. Do people realize that they're inadvertently offering up cakes to the Queen of Heaven? So Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 18 and 19 says, "The children gather wood, and the fathers kindle fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes unto the Queen of Heaven," which we know is Ishtar, Semiramis, Mary, Isis, list goes on. "And to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. Do they provoke me to anger, says Yahuwah? Do they not provoke themselves to the confusion of their own faces? Therefore, thus says Yahuwah your God, Behold, my anger and my fury shall be poured out upon this place." No wonder the Catholic Church abolished the so-called Old Testament, which we know is really not an Old and New Testament, it's one testament. But anyways, that's a whole nother story. It is a glaring condemnation of the entire religious system based in Rome. Semiramis, who was Nimrod's mother and wife, became known in other cultures as Magna Mater, the Great Mother, and she was worshipped as Mother Earth. The sun mated with the earth each spring, and the rites of spring, symbolized by the maypole and Easter, came 9 moons or months before December 25th on the birth of the winter sun. Her Assyrian name is Ishtar, which is where we derive the name Easter. Easter The goddess of the dawn is the universal goddess of fertility throughout history since the Tower of Babel. She began as Nimrod's wife Semiramis, and then after Yahuwah scattered the nations and confused their languages at the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 10 and 11, her image with her baby son Tammuz migrated to other nations under different names. The Romans called her Astarte, but later she was called Venus, and the Phoenicians called her Asherah. The Hebrews called her Astaroth, the consort of Baal or Baal. Her emblem is the flower of the lily. She is the goddess of the dawn, and her statue stands on a bridge in France. The French made a colossus of this image, and it now stands in our New York harbor in the U.S. facing east, referring to the name Ishtar or Easter. And we call this idol of her the Statue of Liberty. Why is she facing the east? So Ezekiel chapter 8 verse 16 says, "And he brought me into the inner court of Yahuwah's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of Yahuwah, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs toward the temple of Yahuwah, and their faces toward the east, and they worshipped the sun toward the east." Very interesting. So the French Illuminati donated this statue to America in order to bring the spirit of Jezebel's influence upon our nation. We covered this in an earlier video when we talked about the Trinity. The torch she carries is the light of Lucifer, which is the same light of Freemasonry. Easter is a day that is honored by nearly all of contemporary Christians and is used to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which now we know is actually Tammuz, not our true Messiah, Yahusha. This holiday often involves a church service at sunrise or sun worship, a feast which includes an Easter ham or the abominable sacrifice, decorated eggs, and stories about rabbits. So let's quickly summarize what Easter is all about. So, Ishtar, which is pronounced Easter, was a day that commemorated the resurrection of one of their gods that they called Tammuz. Tammuz was believed to be the only begotten son of the moon goddess and the sun god. In ancient times, there was a man named Nimrod who was the grandson of one of Noah's sons named Ham. Ham had a son named Cush, who married a woman named Semiramis. Cush and Semiramis then had a son named Nimrod. After the death of his father, Nimrod married his own mother and became a powerful king. The Bible tells us of this man Nimrod in Genesis chapter 10, verse 8 through 10 as follows, saying, "And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter in the face of Yahuwah, wherefore it is said, even Nimrod, the mighty hunter in the face of Yahuwah. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, and the land of Shinar." Nimrod became a god-man to the people, and Semiramis, his wife and mother at the same time, became the powerful queen of ancient Babylon. Nimrod was eventually killed by an enemy, and his body was cut into pieces and sent to various parts of his kingdom. Semiramis had all the parts gathered except for one part that could not be found, which happened to be his reproductive organ. Semiramis claimed that he could not come back to life without it, and told the people of Babylon that Nimrod had ascended to the sun and was now to be called Baal or Baal, the sun god. Queen Semiramis also proclaimed that Baal or Baal would be present on the earth in the form of a flame representing the sun, whether candle or lamp, when used in worship. Semiramis was creating a mystery religion, and with the help of Satan, she set herself up as a goddess. Semiramis claimed that she was immaculately conceived. So these are some of the things that she really started to claim so she could create this religion. And, she didn't do this on her own. You have to realize that she was guided in how to do this and how to create all of this. She taught that the moon was a goddess cycle that went through a 28-day cycle and ovulated when full. She taught the moon that the moon was a goddess. I don't know why I just double did that. But anyway, so she further claimed that she came down from the moon in a giant moon egg and then fell into the Euphrates River as she emerged as the moon fertility goddess Ishtar. This was to have happened at the time of the first full moon after the spring equinox. Semiramis became known as Ishtar, which is pronounced Easter, and her moon egg became known as the Ishtar's egg. Every year on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox, a celebration was made. It was Ishtar's Sunday and was celebrated with rabbits and eggs. The Ishtar eggs were dyed in the blood of babies sacrificed to Tammuz with the cross of Tammuz emblazoned on them, as the children would hunt the eggs in the likeness of Tammuz and Nimrod, the mighty hunters. Ishtar also proclaimed that because Tammuz was killed by a pig, that a pig must be eaten on Ishtar's Sunday. At this point, we begin to see what exact abominable beast replaced the sacrifice of the Passover lamb. It was then and still is the Easter pig of Ishtar, which we'll talk more on later. So let's talk a little bit about the Easter bunny. Tammuz was actually noted to be especially fond of rabbits, and they became sacred in the ancient religion because Tammuz was believed to be the son of the sun god Baal or Baal. The rabbit is one of the most fertile creatures on the earth and held sacred to the fertility religion that Semiramis had created in Babylon. Ishtar was the fertility goddess, and the Ishtar or Easter rabbit was her symbol. Easter or Ishtar egg hunting originated with Tammuz, like his supposed father, who had become a hunter. The day came when Tammuz was killed by a wild pig, and Queen Ishtar then told the people that Tammuz has now ascended to his father Baal or Baal, and that the two of them would be with the worshippers in the sacred candle or a lamp flame as Father, Son, and Spirit. So that's where you're seeing that Trinity come into play again as well. So moving on to the evergreen tree, Ishtar, who was now worshipped as the mother of God and queen of heaven, continued to build her mystery religion. The queen told the worshippers that when Tammuz was killed by the pig, some of his blood fell on the stump of an evergreen tree, and the stump grew into a full-grown tree overnight. This made the evergreen tree sacred by the blood of Tammuz, and this is something that we see used in the Christmas ritual, where you cut down an evergreen tree, you bring it into your house, and all of this stuff. She also proclaimed a 40-day period and time of sorrow each year prior to the anniversary of the death of Tammuz. During this time, no meat was to be eaten, and we again know this today as Lent. So worshippers were to meditate upon the sacred mysteries of Baal or Baal and Tammuz, and were to make the sign of the T in the front of their hearts as they worshipped. Again, today this is called the sign of the cross, made over the hearts of Christians, as we read, Christians and Catholics, as we read from the Catholic Encyclopedia, which states, the cross was originally traced by Christians with the thumb or finger on their own foreheads. This practice is attested by numberless allusions in patristic literature, and it was clearly associated in idea with certain references in Scripture, notably Ezekiel 9:4 of the mark of the letter Tau, Exodus 17, verse 9 through 14, and especially Apocalypse 7:3, 9:4, and 14:1. And Apocalypse is referring to Revelation. Hardly less early in date is the custom of marking a cross on Christians. Already Tertullian speaks of the Christian woman signing her bed, and I'm not going to read because that's just a reference of what it is. So she was signing her bed before retiring to rest. And we soon hear also of the sign of the cross being traced on the lips and on the heart. So we've seen the cross of Tammuz. We've seen the evergreen tree come into play. We've seen the bunny come into play. Let's talk about the hot cross buns. So they also ate sacred cakes with the marking of a T or a cross on the top. And today we call them hot cross buns. We bake and eat them on Ishtar or Ishtar's sun god day or Easter Sunday.